Welcome to Ubuntu University. This is Mbaliga Chama. In a previous conversation, I mentioned the concept that it's constantly being said that this generation is a generation of healers. And that's a concept I find quite intriguing because um, people talk about the age of Pisces, the awakening of the feminine, and rethinking old ideas and concepts. And Ubuntu is one of those that I believe hasn't been given enough credit as a tool to navigate life in this era. Um, this conversation, I love the concept of calling these conversations because it's not a lecture, um, relates to a book that is a work in progress, and it's called Mavericks Unleashed. And it's about how healers navigate this world, healers in the African sense. Um, in Africa, people who are troubled, whether it be mentally, psychologically, emotionally, or physically at times, are considered to be gifted. And the way that spirit manifests itself is sometimes in the form of behavior that is considered outside of the norm. And in ancient times and in indigenous cultures, there were spaces and environments for people like that, not to suppress one's uniqueness, but to channel it. And having been on a journey similar to that for what is now 6 years of my life, it's been quite incredible to see my self shift from one who was very much attached to the intellect to a person who is now more spirit led. And I believe this book, I would wish it to be prescribed along with meds in mental institutions because there's a lot of healers in those spaces, misunderstood people who are being medicated out of their purpose because meds want to bring you to the acceptable middle, whereas some of us were born to color outside the lines, way outside the lines. So yeah, this is going to be called Mavericks Unleashed Fundamentals. And as I'm seeing, it's got 50 slides, and I haven't rehearsed this. I've just been putting thoughts and ideas into this into this presentation over time. But today I haven't actually had a chance to review except for the first maybe couple of pages. So yeah, let's just dig into the fundamentals of how to exist as a maverick. And that is a healer, an artist, a creator, a feeler. There's a lot of talk now about empaths, and whenever they define them, I find myself relating to them quite a bit. But all of those gifts tend to come with a darker, shameful side. And shame is a big concept to unpack for healers because at times spirit will need to give you a Job experience, Job from the Bible, bawling businessman with everything who lost it all. Because in those dark nights of the soul, that's where you get to meet your true self. And even most of us with the experience, um, you get to see the true side of those around you. And then when you're introduced to that God aspect of your own soul, it's something that, well, for some of us, like myself, I knew that I didn't fit into society's ideas of what normal should be. But that thing, that one me thing, that God in me thing, is something I couldn't medicate away. I needed it. I came to this world to be it. So, yeah, Mavericks Unleashed is about that. I want to try and go through some of these quite quickly. First things first, it's about the joys of becoming. I think I've always had this fear that by the time you're 30, life can't surprise you because now you're old. And I used to think that in my 20s, and that's why I was so eager to write a lot and explore different types of books and ideas and concepts because I was like, when I hit 30, that's the expiry date. Now I'll just be regurgitating concepts from my 20s and 30s and teens, and. So, yeah. And when my own gifts started to manifest in what I would call misunderstood and undiagnosable mental illness, there was still that joy of becoming where I was being introduced to aspects of my own personality I hadn't explored before. My sixth book, To Whom Much Is Given, talks about the Johari window. And if you've never been exposed to it, you should Google it. It's quite fascinating. But it talks about our own personality being divided into four quadrants. So, quadrant one is the part that the world knows that you know about yourself. So, Bali is short, she's got big eyes, dreadlocks, and a big personality. um, Quadrant two is things that the world knows about you that you don't know about you. So, one thing I think I didn't know until I started listening to these recordings is that I speak pretty fast. But other people may have known that about me. And often that's where it's said it's important to have enemies because enemies will tell you exactly what's wrong with you. Maybe it's in a way to hurt you, but it's also a gift because it opens up your understanding of yourself in totality. And then the third quadrant is things that you know about yourself that the world doesn't know. For me, for instance, it would be most likely my insomnia. I feel like I don't sleep. And in my dreams are very fascinating, fun places to be because I feel a lot in my dreams. And when I wake up, it's usually not the activity that I remember, but it's the feeling. And whenever I wake up in the morning, that feeling just reinforces something for me. So the rest of the world doesn't know that. But for me, it's what drives me into the day to be like, yes, even in my subconscious, I'm still solid. And then the fourth quadrant of the Johari window is aspects of yourself that the world doesn't know and you don't know. And that's where the joys of becoming come in, where you're constantly like a flower that's just unfolding, blossoming, blooming into new versions of yourself. And nature does that a lot. I'm lately very fascinated by the Fibonacci sequence and how it's repeated so many times in nature. And it's this beautiful iteration of transformation and impermanence of life and its beauty as well. Uh, I will not skip this. I actually thought I would, but I won't. This was just a comment I remember related to one of my last trips to a psychologist after I'd been told that what's going on with you is more spiritual than it is psychological. But we ignore the messages, the signs, and I remember just feeling very anxious and overwhelmed. And then I went to see a psychologist because I was like, okay, we need to balance what's going on in my head. It's like a service for your brain. And this is what happened. So I'll just read it. It was with a sense of irony that I almost laughed as the shrink turned the page in her notebook to write more issues down during that first session. A single A4 page was definitely not going to be enough. It wasn't much of a surprise though, although the look on her face was. I was so used to the shock. She took it all in her stride. That was new, I must say. Every time each of them would hear my story, after the initial shock subsided, they would turn to me with this deep sadness, their eyes asking what their profession doesn't allow them to utter. How the hell are you still standing? No one can ever answer that, any of that. The great achievements couldn't be explained, the horrors, undiagnosed illness, the body tremors, none of it could be explained, especially to the person who had to wake up every day and live them. That being me. So, just felt good to read that. With Mavericks Unleashed, it's about those of us who've been through the extremities of this life experience and know that we know that we know our life purpose, but our realities have often been tragic, overwhelming, traumatic, painful. And it's to say, on a deep, 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 profound level, your soul chose that so that it can birth the diamond. And I'm not gonna go deep into that, but it's just one of the premises to say, as we talk about healing healers, healers are the people who have, as young people would say, been through the most and are still standing and have a very potent medicine as a result to bring to the world. So yeah, let's dig in. I'm a big fan of life hacks. There's this wonderful TED talk about African proverbs being great life hacks, and that for me was very liberating as a concept because since then I've always just taken the time to understand the lessons in African proverbs. So there's another concept I just thought of, which is mind hacks. And this one is understand the meaning you attach to everything. Interestingly enough, I was watching Joy Mogami, shout out to my sister Warrior, um, and she was talking about woundiology. And woundiology is a very interesting concept, but it's about your entire identity being wrapped up around your wound. So when you define yourself as that wound, and when every life experience is experienced through the lens of that wound. Very interesting concept. So I'll just read through here. Without downplaying trauma, trauma is real. So there's this thing, and if you're not from Africa, you might not know that generally mental illness is associated with being a spiritual person. So when ancestors come to us in human form, they come in dreams, in visions, in messages, but they also manifest as mental illness. And the Dagara tribe, which I reference quite a lot from Burkina Faso, they call their healers gatekeepers. And gatekeepers, the concept of gatekeepers has been popularized by the idea that even the sexuality of gatekeepers is not taboo if it's outside of what is considered the norm. So, whilst most modern African cultures are against homosexuality, a gatekeeper can have different types of lovers and they don't necessarily need to explain themselves. So, the concept with gatekeepers in the Dagara tribe is that they are gatekeepers between this world and the next. So they are gatekeepers to things that we, on a normal daily basis, may not know about. And because they are the keepers of the gate, they are therefore the experts on that particular gate. And you can't come to a certain person and say you are not allowed to kiss a person of the sex or fall in love with them. As a gatekeeper, the rules are relaxed for them because they exist in multiple worlds. And I would say I experienced this during my own, I almost said coming out as if I was coming out sexually, but my own transformation the last 6 years, and how the world had always been a world of matter and mind, things that can be explained, things that can be seen. But the more when I start having meaningful experiences in a spiritual realm, it started to be interesting and confusing and lonely and scary. But with gatekeepers, you are asked to embrace even all of that and channel it in a way. And that's where initiation comes in quite often. It's a very important rite of passage because you learn the modalities of that space. But one thing most healers in my space have always stressed, and I continue to do so myself, there is room for medicine and psychological intervention. So people with diagnosed mental illnesses should not, we can, but we should not all now flock to we are all healers and forget my meds, forget the things I've put in place, my meetings with my therapist and all of that. Because I think with Ubuntu University, it's not about replacing knowledge, it's about adding to it. And with every person who's experienced any kind of being mentally or psychologically overwhelmed by life, just exploring a few different concepts or different points of view, not necessarily discarding everything else. Because as I was saying, we don't want to downplay trauma. Trauma is real. So people who have dealt with trauma need to walk a journey of healing. And that journey doesn't necessarily have to be 100 years. There's amazing concepts in that are being exposed at the moment. The one I found particularly fascinating is quantum healing and the idea of folding space and time, where, or even transurfing, where you speak to your future, your past selves, and you have healing sessions with yourself. So yeah, you need to understand the meaning you attach to everything, from experiences to people's actions, your actions, wealth, abundance, success, healing. I think more than anything else, the journey of a healer is a journey of self knowledge, self love, and self mastery. And that's why I'm so particularly passionate about this as a module for Ubuntu University. The idea of getting to know and fall in love with you, the God in you, the Ntu in you, and how you relate to yourself as God in human form. And that's something we're going to go into deeper. I'm on slide 5, 21 minutes in. I need to speed up. The next mind hack is about being selective about what you feed your brain and body. This is very important. And I recognize this, as I mentioned earlier, always struggled with insomnia. And as a result, wine was compulsory for sleep. But then you go through a year and you don't remember the last time you went a day without alcohol. And for me, with everything else that I was dealing with, it was it took a toll on my body. So, as one who is spiritually inclined, actually, one of the biggest shifts for me have been moving to this farm, because living on a farm, I get a lot of fresh air, I get to breathe, I get to work outdoors, and in the morning I do sun gazing, um, where I just do my meditations outside in nature, in the sun. All of that has been phenomenal for my mental clarity, for my spiritual alignment. It's just important to know that before we get esoteric and spiritual, the practical things are very helpful. And I've stopped drinking wine at night. It's now chamomile tea. And then create your own universal language. This is a fascinating one, and it relates to the concept of normal, which I mentioned in the Ubuntu University intro. As a human being, you are a universe. You know, in your universe, that feeling when you're pressed and you need to go to the bathroom. You know when you've got a headache. It's a language that your body sends signals to say, hey, we have a problem there. But the conversation does not only have to happen when something is wrong. Being aligned with your own spirit, meditation, listening to your body, that's where you create your universal language. And then, on an even more important level, it's affirmation, where you reinforce ideas of yourself that empower you. And that's where you give yourself the language, because the world could say, you're not short enough, tall enough, rich enough, this or that. And if you create your own universe, you have a counter conversation to have with your own mind. Because if that's all you're taking in, that's all you end up replaying, and that's all you end up bringing forth into the world. So the power of the mind is about you taking charge of your universe. Um, I love this quote. What you seek seeks you. This is by Rumi, and it relates back to what I was talking about earlier, about you, your soul chose this, and it didn't choose it for it to end here in the phase where you are sowing and planting seeds. There is a bigger dream vision that is deep within your own gut, and that is what your soul chose for you. I recently shared with my sisterhood network group um, this an image that talks about one of the hardest things I've ever had to do is say yes to my inner champion. And when you talk about what you seek seeks you, it's that greatness within you. And this is also another powerful one for transurfing, because here you channel yourself in 5, 10 years time, and you have a conversation with that person, and she or he tells you, um, you know, to get to where I was, I had to really be serious about my weight, about my studies, about leaving that toxic relationship, about creating those boundaries. So when we talk about what you seek seeks you, it's like a ladder between the you now and the you then. And knowing that the small sacrifices made now are taking you towards something bigger, or even the yes that you say to yourself now, yes to my happiness, yes to my freedom, yes to my expression, all of that, what you seek seeks you. And the quote on the left is, being different chose me, but now I choose it. I've always said that one day when I'm old and gray, I'm going to write my memoirs. Well, my first book was a memoir, but it's now 10 years out of date. And it will be called I'm Married to My Madness. Married to My Madness. And at some point, I really reached a place in my life that I just thanked myself for sticking with it, because the first time I think, what was I struggling with? I think it was, at that time it was called adult ADD, and then another one was anxiety disorder, and then bipolar 2, and then I don't know what else. But yeah, we've been having a field day with psychologists and psychiatrists in my head. But um, I reached a point where I was like, the first thing, oh, one of them was, one of the incidences with psychologists, they said, you need to be on medication. Then now, one of the side effects of the medication is that it mellows you out. So if you've got ADD, yes, you're able to be creative and whatever, but then you have manic episodes, so it just calms you down. And I was like, hold on, when you are busy with the calming me down, where does that leave my creativity? As a writer, it's me. You might as well switch off the machine, pull the plugs, if you are gonna leave me alive without my creativity. And they said, of course, that's one of the side effects. It affects your creative ability. And I was like, thank you very much. I am not taking that pill. What's option B? And they said it's pulling yourself out of whatever phase is detrimental to you by your bootstraps. Now, the concept of bootstraps is, it's near saying climb Kilimanjaro. Do it yourself. Figure it out. Make it happen. And that's a very lonely and gray area. But for me, I was like, okay, they gave me one option: to kill my creativity or pull myself out of this by my bootstraps. So option B it is. And that's when I believe I chose my madness, because now I couldn't claim to have be experiencing something that couldn't be fixed. I was refusing to fix it in conventional ways. But at my core, I believed I was born like this for a reason. So that's where What You Seek Seeks You comes in. I have decided this video is already long. I'm not going to make it to all 50 slides, so I'll have to cut it up into pieces. I'm having too much fun to start speeding up just so I can get through them. Oh, and then we get to my favorite business person. Um, Between him and Steve Jobs, and Mr. Virgin as well, to some extent. Um, I love Jack Ma, and one of my favorite quotes by him is, "Just because we're crazy doesn't mean we're stupid." And it relates back to that Apple advert, the famous one that everyone's always quoting. Here's to the crazy ones. And the world says they like crazy, but the world systems aren't geared towards crazy. And crazy is very many iterations, and I know shrinks. Psychologists hate that term. But for me, it came to symbolize just everything that is wild and untamable about me. And when it became a challenge for myself or my family, I had to keep reminding myself and those around me that just because I'm crazy doesn't mean I'm stupid. I'm one of the smartest people I know. And within the madness is the genius. I've got this amazing artwork by one of my favorite artists currently, Enoch Mlangen. And when he painted it, he likes to paint live. And when he painted this one, he said, it's called "Whatever You Do, Don't Hide Your Madness." And it's always just that reminder that it's okay to be crazy. Just don't hurt anyone or even yourself. Mm, let me see. I'm gonna make it to slide 13 at this rate. So now we're on slide 10. There's nothing worse than a society that will break you, than shame you for being broken. Ooh, this one. This one MJ's me, Baligajan, not Michael Jackson. This one. My life has had its fair share of hellos and goodbyes, I would call them. Working in different companies, living in different countries, having relationships with different people, lots of hellos and goodbyes. And when I look at my own emotional wounds and areas where I have identified myself as a victim of society, so being raped, being in a violent relationship, even existing within post apartheid South Africa, especially corporate SA, that was mentally daunting for me, especially for someone of my nature who feels a lot. But having resurrected myself a number of times from difficulties, I found that one of the most debilitating aspects is that when you're trying to be better, then the stigma of your past and what people say comes back to crush you. So yeah, this for me was very emotional when I wrote it. And I'm not a fan of writing such sinister kind of posts where it seems like, yeah, you messed me up. Now I'm gonna be shouting all about it on social media. No. It's not that. This was deeply personal. There is nothing worse than a society that will break you, then shame you for being broken. Aseeing andawonye is a Zulu term meaning we're not all going in the same direction. It's actually the term is aseeing andawonye singemanzi, which is we don't flow, we're not water. And that's an important realization. I mean, we learn that in our teens, that individuality, uniqueness, but we still want to be part of a clique because belonging is important. But in my adult life, one of the things that have defined me is that I am different and we're not all going in the same direction. Sobon Fusome, in one of her talks about um, all of us are in the world to bring medicine to the world. So our life's experiences are medicine to the world. And even our vocations, whatever they may be. And the medicine that you might be birthing is medicine that will heal 3 people. And the work you have to do correlates with that. So it's not much. But if you have medicine to birth to heal a continent, you might have to go a bit deeper into all aspects of life in order for you to deliver that medicine. So Aseeing andawonye is just for me a reminder that I don't fit in and I shouldn't always aspire to fit in, although we delve very deeply into the concept of celestial tribes. And I think where that differs from Aseeing andawonye is in a world of 7 billion, my tribesmen are 1 million. And when it comes to them, we're flowing in the same direction. But whenever I'm alone in a room filled with people from other tribes, or even alone in a country where I feel like people don't understand, I must be okay with tapping into my own authentic self and knowing that I am not alone because my tribesmen and the gifts I need to bring to the world and the virtues that I was born with it's okay for them to be. um, Second to last, angingedwa. And angingedwa means I'm not alone. This one concept has carried me through incredibly dark places. And I remember a time where I was I was committed to this place. I'd never been in a mental institution or a rehab because it was like a cross between both, but it had very interesting people. And I felt so lonely because for me at that point, my sense of self, I didn't relate to these people, talk to themselves and act funny and and I had to start having internal dialogues. And I wouldn't say start at that point, but I had to reintroduce that internal dialogue with myself. And that's where I learned the lesson. Never say I'm not crazy, because that's when they think you're crazy. And this book will go back to the concept of crazy quite a lot, because that's who it's aimed at, the people who have been called crazy. But as the new Nike ad says, if they call you crazy, show them what crazy can do. And when we say angingedwa, it's you're part of an army of healers like yourself. And within that army, crazy is the access card to the VIP area. Like, once you're called crazy, you get a standing ovation from those of us who know that crazy comes with such power, such magic, such beauty. And you should never downplay that or feel like you're alone, because you're not, and you're in great company. The last one for today is to thine own self be true. I've always had a couple of quotes that I just adore. The one is we are what we repeatedly do. Excellence, therefore, is not an act but a habit. And then this one, to thine own self be true, then surely as day follows night, you can be false to no man. Like, that just sums it up. As I said, when I'm old and grey, and when I have so much fun writing about how I was introduced to so many aspects of my glorious, multifaceted, unfuckwithable self. And unfuckwithable means nobody could tell me not to be me. My brother and I are in business together. We're farming here. And last year we were discussing what is success, what does success look like? And I remember his answer was success is having options. And I thought that was very profound. But my definition of success was, for me, success is don't tell me who I am on my behalf. And that's what sums up to thine own self be true. Because with that, my soul, which chose this journey into this world, knows why it came here. And it knows its joy, its magic, the medicine that it's bringing. And as it does so, celebrate, savor. Oh, savoring is a big thing for everybody. But just always go back to being true to yourself, because then you can be false to no one. Madlamini lo.